Okay, welcome to a deep dive. Today we're grappling with some really foundational ideas, stuff that defines the modern world, really.
hmm
How we organize ourselves, how power works, and, you know, why rules and efficiency seem to be just everywhere. We're cracking open the insights of Max Weber.
That's right. The brilliant, maybe sometimes intense German sociologist.
Definitely intense, seems fair.
Yeah. We've pulled together quite a few sources for this core texts, some analyses, notes, looking at his life, his unique way of dissecting society, and these really key concepts.
Like rationalization.
Rationalization, authority, and that structure that, let's face it, runs so much of our lives. Bureaucracy.
Right. And our mission today, it isn't just to list Weber's ideas, is it? We want to
Right.
get to the core of why they still matter.
Exactly. What was he trying to figure out about this world hurtling towards modernity? What tools did he leave us?
Yeah, tools to understand organizations,
Yeah.
power, and how does his analysis of something like bureaucracy, which, let's be honest, can feel kind of dry or old-fashioned,
Mhm.
how does it speak to the things you face today?
Right? Maybe at your job or dealing with government or just navigating modern life.
We're going to explore his big argument about rationalization, this like fundamental shift towards calculation and rules, especially in the West.
And untangle how power becomes legitimate, in people's eyes. And then we'll take a really close look at his famous ideal type bureaucracy.
He saw its efficiency for sure.
Absolutely. Incredible efficiency. But he also warned about its potential to feel, well, kind of dehumanizing, less than human.
Okay, so buckle up. We're exploring the bedrock of the modern administrative state through Weber's eyes. Let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So, Max Weber, definitely not casual reading. Born 1864, died 1920, right in the middle of Germany's massive transformation. What's sort of the key thing about his background that really shapes his thinking?
Well, he came from a pretty prominent family, deep connections to politics, religion too, in Erfurt. Educated broadly. Law, economics, history held important academic jobs. But something that often gets missed, but I think is crucial, he had this major health crisis around the turn of the century, sidelined him for years.
Really? Years.
Yeah, but after he recovered, that's when he produced some of his absolute biggest work.
Wow. That period of struggle, then this incredible burst of intellectual energy, it kind of humanizes the dense ideas, doesn't it?
It really does. And he wasn't just locked away thinking. The sources mention he was actually involved in drafting the Weimar Constitution.
So he wasn't just theorizing about the state from afar.
Not at all. He was right there grappling with the practical challenges of building a modern political system after World War I. It gives his analysis of power and bureaucracy a very grounded feel.
Okay, so a life shaped by academia, serious illness, direct political engagement. How did he think we should actually study society? What was his method?
His sociology really centers on what he called Verstinen interpretive understanding.
Verstehen.
Yeah. The point wasn't just to observe behavior like an outsider, but to analyze the subjective meanings people attach to what they do.
So it's not just enough to say, okay, this group did X. You need to understand why they did X, what it meant to them.
Precisely. He was definitely concerned with the big patterns, power, authority, rationalization, but always trying to link it back to individual actions and their meanings. He saw sociology as deeply historical, analytical, not just, crunching numbers.
Which brings us to his famous toolkit, the concepts he developed for this kind of analysis. What's the really big one everyone connects with Weber?
Oh, undoubtedly the ideal type. This is probably one of his most fundamental contributions.
Okay, ideal type. Now, importantly, these aren't ideal as in perfect or desirable, right?
Exactly. That's a common misunderstanding. They're analytical constructs, mental tools. He built these models by taking key features of some social thing like bureaucracy or a type of religious belief and sort of exaggerating them to create a pure, logically consistent concept.
So an ideal type bureaucracy isn't the best possible bureaucracy, but more like a pure model that highlights the essential bureaucratic features, which you can then use to compare real-world examples. You've got it. It's a benchmark. Helps you see how reality measures up or deviates and why. Another key part of his method is methodological individualism.
Meaning?
The idea that to understand large-scale social stuff, you ultimately have to look at the actions and meanings of the individuals involved. The macro picture is built from the micro level.
And he had pretty strong views on the role of the scientist, the academic in all this, keeping personal views separate.
Absolutely. That's his whole push for value-free social science. For Weber, science could clarify facts, analyze consequences, offer precision.
No.
It could tell you the most efficient way to achieve a goal you've already decided on.
But couldn't tell you what goals to choose in the first place.
Exactly. Science deals with what is, the facts. It can't answer the ultimate questions of what ought to be, the values. That's a different realm. That separation of facts and values, it feels incredibly relevant and maybe often ignored today.
It was absolutely central for him, a matter of intellectual honesty. Now, if we pull back, look at the huge historical shift Weber saw. The core concept driving it all is rationalization.
Okay, let's really unpack that. Rationalization, you called it the hallmark of modern Western society. What does that actually look like? What does it mean?
It means this increasing shift away from actions based on, say, tradition, we've always done it this way, or emotion, it feels right, or personal values, towards action based on calculated rule-based reasoning, efficiency, predictability.
So think spreadsheets, algorithms, legal codes, standard operating procedures, instead of just customer impulse.
Precisely. Moving from "grandpa did it this way" to "the analysis shows this procedure is 5% more cost-effective." Weber saw this process as the engine behind the rise of everything that defines modernity.
Like bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy, capitalism, the modern legal system, the modern state itself, all deeply intertwined with this rationalizing trend.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. He didn't just talk about rationalization as one single thing. He broke it down right. 4 different types.
Yes, and this nuance is crucial. First, there's practical rationality. This is just everyday problem solving based on self-interest. How do I get from A to B fastest? What's the best deal? Pragmatic calculation for immediate goals.
Okay, like using common sense to manage your own life efficiently.
Pretty much. Then there's theoretical rationality. This is about abstract thinking, purely for the sake of knowledge or understanding the world conceptually. Think science, philosophy, mathematics.
The pursuit of knowledge for its own sake.
Right. Third is substantive rationality. Here, your actions are guided by a core set of values, maybe ethical, religious, political, regardless of the practical payoff.
Like choosing honesty even if it costs you something.
Exactly. You act according to your principles, your substance. And finally, the big one for understanding modern institutions, formal rationality.
This is the key one for bureaucracy.
Absolutely. This is decision-making based on universally applied abstract rules, laws, and procedures. Think legal statutes, accounting rules, organizational regulations. It's impersonal, calculable, consistent.
Ah, okay. So formal rationality is like the underlying logic, the operating system for both his idea of legal rational authority and the ideal type bureaucracy we mentioned.
You nailed it. It's that logic of consistent, predictable, rule-bound operation that lets those massive structures function.
Okay, speaking of structures and how they function, let's talk about power and order. Weber uses the term domination.
Yes. He saw domination simply as power being exercised, but he made a key distinction between power that just comes from, say, economic position or social status, and power based on authority.
Okay, so having money gives you power, obviously. But authority is something different, more accepted.
Authority is legitimated domination. It's power that people accept as valid or rightful. They obey not just out of fear or self-interest, but because they believe the person or the system issuing commands has the right to do so.
And this is where he gives us those 3 famous ways power gets legitimized. The 3 types of legitimate authority.
Correct. Number 1, traditional authority. Legitimacy here comes from deeply ingrained customs and belief in the sanctity of tradition. Think of hereditary monarchies. You obey the king because his family has always ruled. It's just the way things are.
Power based on history, inheritance, custom. Got it.
Yep. Second type, charismatic authority. This rests entirely on the exceptional personal qualities of a specific leader. Their perceived heroism, sanctity, or just extraordinary character.
So people follow because they're inspired by the leader themselves, like a prophet or a revolutionary hero.
Exactly. Think Gandhi, maybe Napoleon, figures who command intense personal devotion. It's very powerful, but often unstable, right? Because it's tied to that one individual. If they disappear.
The authority might vanish too.
Okay.
And the third type, the modern one.
The basis of modern power structures. Rational legal authority. Here, legitimacy comes from a belief in the legality of formal rules and laws, and the right of those appointed or elected under those rules to issue commands.
So this loops right back to formal rationality again. The rules themselves are legitimate, and you obey the official because they occupy an office defined by those legitimate rules.
Precisely. You follow the instructions of the tax auditor, not because you like them personally or because their family were always tax auditors, but because they're acting under the authority granted by tax law.
Which is the foundation for the modern state and, crucially, for bureaucracy.
Exactly. This type of authority makes large-scale, complex, impersonal administration possible.
Okay, the stage is perfectly set. Let's dive deep into the bureaucratic structure itself, Weber's ideal type. What are the core characteristics he identified? What makes it tick?
Well, Weber saw modern organization increasingly shaped by these legal rational principles, aiming for efficient coordination towards specific goals. His ideal type bureaucracy is really built on several key pillars.
Okay, lay them out for us. What does this theoretical model look like?
First, hierarchy. A clear chain of command, defined levels of authority, supervision. Someone's always reporting to someone higher up.
Got it. Top-down structure.
Yes. Then, division of labor. Tasks are broken down, specialized, assigned to specific offices or roles that require particular expertise.
Everyone stays in their lane, does their specific job.
Right. Third, rule-bound operations. Everything is guided by formal, usually written rules and regulations. Consistency is key. Documents, records, routines are central.
The infamous paper trail, or maybe the digital trail now.
Exactly. Fourth, impersonality. Decisions are meant to be based on objective criteria and rules, not on personal feelings, connections, or favoritism. Treat similar cases similarly.
Treat everyone according to the manual, regardless of who they are.
That's the ideal, yes. Fifth, merit-based recruitment. Officials are selected based on their technical qualifications, skills, competence, often proven through exams or credentials.
So you get the job based on what you know, not who you know.
Supposedly. Sixth, career orientation. Holding an office is a full-time occupation, a vocation even. There's a fixed salary, job security or tenure, and a structured path for promotion, often based on seniority or merit.
A professional class of administrators.
Exactly. And importantly, these officials are typically appointed to their positions based on merit, not elected. And there's a strong emphasis on discipline within the whole system.
Okay, you list those out, and you immediately see why it's seen as so efficient for running, say, a huge government department or a multinational corporation.
Absolutely. It's designed to be a highly efficient, predictable machine for administration on a massive scale.
Which brings us to the evaluation. The strengths are clear, but what about the downsides? The potential problems?
Well, the strengths are exactly what you'd expect from those characteristics. Efficiency, speed, precision, predictability, stability, reduction of irrationality. It allows for orderly handling of incredibly complex tasks. Weber considered it technically superior to any other form of organization for these purposes.
Objectively, it gets the job done reliably. Yeah. But you mentioned earlier a potential darker side, maybe dehumanizing. What were the major criticisms or the dangers Weber saw?
Yeah, despite the efficiency, he saw significant potential downsides. The very rigidity that ensures predictability can lead to red tape and inflexibility. The system can struggle to adapt to unique cases or changing circumstances.
Getting bogged down in the rules, even when they don't make sense in a specific situation.
Exactly. Then there's the risk of goal displacement. This is where following the rules and procedures becomes an end in itself, more important than achieving the actual objective the rules were designed to serve.
Right. The means totally replaces the end. Bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake.
Yes. And maybe most critically, that core principle of impersonality, while promoting fairness, can lead to dehumanization and alienation.
How so?
Well, individuals interacting with the bureaucracy or even working within it can feel treated like cogs in a machine, like cases or numbers rather than people. It can stifle creativity, initiative, individual judgment. This is where you get that famous metaphor he used. The iron cage.
Exactly. The iron cage of rationality. The idea that we become trapped in systems of our own making, focused solely on rational calculation and efficiency, potentially losing something essentially human in the process.
That's a really powerful kind of chilling image. It captures that core tension between machine-like efficiency and, well, human values.
Yeah.
Weber also applied these ideas directly to politics, right? He had thoughts on leadership and bureaucracy in government.
He certainly did. He was a proponent of a strong parliament, partly as a necessary counterweight to the power of the professional state administration. And he made this really important distinction between two types of ethics for political action.
Okay.
The ethic of responsibility, or Verantwortungsethik, where leaders focus primarily on the foreseeable consequences of their actions in the real world. They weigh the outcomes.
So practical, consequence-focused politics.
Right. Versus the ethic of conviction, Gesinnungsethik, where action is driven purely by adherence to one's deeply held principles or values, almost regardless of the results, acting on conviction alone. Standing on principle, come what may.
Exactly. And Weber argued that responsible political leadership, guided by the ethic of responsibility, was crucial for steering the bureaucracy. He wanted a professional, politically neutral administration.
But definitely under political control.
Absolutely insisted on it. Because he saw the immense power that accumulates within a bureaucracy, they have the expertise, the information, the institutional memory, the control over implementation.
They know how things actually work.
Precisely. And he warned this could lead to bureaucratic domination, where the permanent officials, not the elected politicians, effectively end up setting the direction of policy. That undermines democratic accountability.
So the experts could end up running the show, bypassing the will of the people expressed through elections.
That was his fear. He stressed the constant need for strong, responsible political leadership to set the goals and hold the administrative machine accountable.
Wow, that tension, the power of unelected experts versus democratic control, feels like it's ripped straight from today's headlines. It really highlights Weber's enduring legacy. Why are his ideas still so central?
Well, because he provided the fundamental language and conceptual framework for understanding how modern large-scale organizations and states actually operate. He connected the dots, between seemingly dry administrative structures and huge historical shifts like rationalization.
So his work is foundational for whole fields: organizational theory, public administration.
Absolutely. Political sociology, too. His concepts, like the ideal type, are still active tools in research today, used for comparing different administrative systems across countries or sectors. His influence pops up in contemporary theories like New Institutionalism, Neo-Weberian state models.
And I saw in the sources, scholars are still directly engaging with his core dilemmas.
Yes, exactly. People like Park and Comeau, mentioned in our notes, they're explicitly building on Weber. They argue his insights about the trade-offs efficiency versus potential rigidity or dehumanization are just as relevant now as ever. They even talk about this idea of needing an adaptive bureaucracy today.
Adaptive bureaucracy. What does that mean? Trying to make it less rigid.
Essentially, yeah. Finding ways for these necessary rule-based systems to also be more flexible, responsive, less trapped in that iron cage. It reflects that ongoing struggle with the tensions Weber pinpointed. How much autonomy should expert bureaucrats have versus how much political control is needed? How do you balance transparency with the need for some discretion?
So his fundamental insight holds. The challenge usually isn't whether to have bureaucracy. It seems unavoidable for complex tasks,
Right.
But how do we make it accountable? How do we keep it human?
That's the enduring question.
So wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway? Weber gave us this incredibly powerful lens to see how the modern world is increasingly built on calculated reason, formal rules, all embodied in the bureaucratic structure.
Yeah, he showed us it's this engine of efficiency, technically superior in many ways, but it comes with real potential costs. Inflexibility, getting lost in the rules, and that risk of impersonality, alienation, the iron cage.
And his legacy isn't just the description, it's the tools like ideal types and the crucial questions he forced us to ask about power, about legitimacy, about the human impact of all this rationalization.
And we see today, scholars are still standing on his shoulders, wrestling with those same challenges, looking for things like adaptive bureaucracy to try and square that circle, balance the necessary efficiency with responsiveness and accountability.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty big thought to chew on, building directly on Weber. If formal rule-based bureaucracy is arguably the most efficient way we've found to organize complex societies, and Weber showed us its inherent trade-offs with things like flexibility, creativity, maybe even some aspects of our humanity, how do we make sure that in our constant drive for efficiency, we don't lose sight of those essential human values? How do we maintain democratic control within these powerful, necessary structures? Is adaptive bureaucracy the answer, or are we maybe just finding new ways to decorate the bars of the iron cage?
A challenge as relevant now as it was a century ago.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Max Weber.